We'll bring the meeting to order. Welcome to the March 26, 2025 meeting of the Liberty Lake Planning Commission. We'll begin with our roll call, please.
Joe Mann,
Here.
Tom Stallberg,
Here.
Jim Bumker,
Here.
DG Garcia, Charlie Jenks,
Here.
Dale Robbins,
Present.
Phil Foyer,
Here.
Gene Huschel, and Troy Mullenix.
Move to excuse Commissioners Garcia and Herschel.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Mullenix may join us. He's been ill today, so if he is not able to join us, we will excuse him at that point. So if you would all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We'll go into our general business, review the agenda. Are there any changes or issues with the agenda?
Yes. If I may,
Sure.
I just want to review the comment that I'm quoted of regarding the
Oh, you're talking about the minutes.
the minutes.
We're doing the agenda
Oh,
first.
sorry.
Sorry. That's all right. Any other changes? Any changes? Move to approve it, please.
Move to approve.
Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Now we'll move to the minutes. Commissioner Foyer.
Thank you. I just want to clarify my statement. It says, as I brought up the action taken by the city of Airway Heights regarding the fire sprinkler systems, that last line, as I read that, it sounded like I was a proponent of that. And I just want to clarify, I am not.
Okay.
I am, if I asked if something that the city should bring to the fire department district, or if it's even worth mentioning, that was, I guess that was not my intent, if that's how it was taken. My question was, is the city entertaining doing something like this? Was my question.
Are they entertaining?
Are they entertaining?
Okay.
Not that I'm encouraging that.
Okay.
How about we just add, not that you were encouraging it to the end of this.
Okay, whatever. Yeah,
She's doing it. Kathy, is that okay?
thank you.
Motion to approve the change.
I make a motion to approve.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll move on to workshops. First is the recap of the housing strategy discussion from our February 26th meeting.
Joe, you want to approve the amended minutes?
We did approve the minutes, didn't we?
You approved the amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yes, we need to approve the minutes
I,
for,
make
as
a motion
amended.
To approve as amended.
is there, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
And Evan, can you promote Sharifa to a panelist, please? Thank you. So we're going to kick off today with the housing strategy recap. Just a recap of what we talked about in February. In our February workshops, we covered the barriers to housing affordability memo and relevant housing action plan policies for our consideration. And we also talked about recent housing legislation. And specifically at our last meeting, we focused on associated development code revisions, both those that are required and those that are recommended. And these development code revisions are looking at trying to remove some of the barriers to affordability, which is really the task at hand for us in our goals and policies in the housing element. And so I wanted to go through, you have on your tables an updated readable spreadsheet, not that, my apologies that I can't make it readable in the packet and I should have sent it separately, but I did want to make sure that you had that. And I just wanted to kind of summarize required code amendments. We have to allow duplexes in R1 zones. We have to allow up to 2 ADUs per lot. We have to amend our ADU design standards such that they are not more restrictive than that for the primary housing unit. We need to limit parking requirements as it relates to ADUs and middle housing. We need to remove limitations on spacing and occupancy for transitional and permanent supportive housing. Now, I want to note that we've already made those changes to emergency housing because we couldn't get the land capacity analysis across the finish line. But we have to do it for these as well. I just didn't want to do anything more than we had to do to be able to get through that because I wanted to deal with housing more comprehensively. We also have to include some reduced standards to encourage adaptive reuse of non-residential buildings specifically for residential use. And that's I sent you the information on the legislation that requires that we do that. And so all that has to happen as part of, or within 6 months of the adoption of our comprehensive plan, or by 12/31/2026 if we get the extension. So it'll have to all be done together then. The other thing that came up, and again, co-living housing, and I think that was one that had been lumped in with some providing some alternate housing types to provide for additional affordability. In researching this, we actually found that the co-living, in fact, I got an email from Commerce, and I thought that had to happen as part of all of the other housing changes. No, this has to happen by December 31st of 2025. So we have a workshop at the end about this and a timeline for how we're going to make that happen. And we'll probably parallel the co-housing ordinance hearings with the sign code hearings to just be a little bit more efficient. So I just wanted to share that with you. Co-living housing not only has to be done, it has to be done by December of this year.
Lisa, what do you mean by co-living housing?
So we have a workshop on that at the end, and I'll talk about it a lot more. It's boarding
Okay.
houses.
It's what?
Like boarding houses or.
Okay, thank you. I understand that.
Also known as SROs,
Yes.
single room occupancy.
Yes, in fact, I've got all the synonyms in my presentation.
Want to touch those, but that's just.
Well, I know, but we don't have a choice. So, in certain zones, and we'll talk about that. So, going through the spreadsheet with the green items, these were the ones that were recommended, and we went through and just kind of summarizing the ones that you felt would be the most appropriate for Liberty Lake in terms of trying to reduce barriers to affordability. Expanding housing options, and that's except in the R1 zone. And so some of the housing options were teeny homes, cottage housing, as I said. We thought co-living went there, but co-living is going to go first. We also talked about increasing the maximum density in the R2 zone from 12 units per acre to 16 units per acre to be more consistent with the densities that would allow for the smaller middle housing types, 4-plexes, 6-plexes, those sorts of things. We also you also recommended that we allow more flexibility in commercial requirements related to the vertically mixed use buildings. Right now, we have a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every square foot of residential, you have to have a square foot of commercial. What we would recommend in order to make mixed use buildings even viable in the city of Liberty Lake, we really need to see allowing for ground floor commercial with 2 or even 3 stories, depending upon height limits, of residential above that ground floor. That's really the only way that mixed use buildings are economically viable, and it's really very few people do much more than that. We also, we also talked about eliminating restrictive manufacturing home standards or manufactured home standards, and this is like, the example would be like the 1,000 feet. We're more restrictive on manufactured homes than we are on single-family residential stick-built dwellings. And so we want to address that as well. And also adjusting parking mandates for transitional permanent supportive housing and emergency housing. So those were the ones that as a body you wanted to consider. And so I just wanted to pause on that for a second and make sure that we didn't miss anything, that, and kind of just take a moment to pause and say, do you agree with this summary of what was discussed previously?
This is what we discussed and I agree with it.
Okay, wonderful. And that sets a table for us to then start to move. You're going to see that this is reflected in goals and policies, which we're talking about just a little bit later today. And these will be the things that we will be moving forward in some handouts for the public, and trying to engage some of the public on the housing to get feedback.
Yeah, a quick question. Manufactured home, does that include modular homes?
Yes,
Okay. Just,
it also
Curious.
includes potentially tiny homes.
right, okay.
Just one,
Yeah.
if I can add something to on the back page of this, just wanted to ensure our no's are still no's.
Your no's are still no's, and I think that's so
Okay.
here we go. Here are the ones that are not recommended code amendments. Revising parking requirements for multifamily housing based upon the number of bedrooms. We talked about that. And that becomes, it becomes an enforcement problem, knowing how multifamily developments are actually constructed. And then also modifying or removing requirements for balconies or patios in multifamily housing. And we feel like that's a quality of life issue. And so those are the two potential strategies that you did not agree with. And so I guess pause for a second to see if there's any other discussion, any other thoughts that you have on this topic. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of these. And like, for example, the update number 2 talks about increasing the density in R2 zones. I believe it's 2. And I think that's a good idea. From 12 to 16, I think that's a really good sound decision. When we were discussing this table, I suggested that you do that as well for the industrial district. Because a lot of communities like to combine apartments with employment for a lot of good reasons. You reduce trips, if they're close to transit corridors, and just looking at the zoning map for Liberty Lake, the industrial district and the R2 are close, fairly close to employment, except for the one that's just west of the high school. You mentioned that it would be a downzoning. I don't consider that change for the industrial district a downzoning. I think it would be actually an upzoning. It would give you the more flexibility.
So I misunderstood what you were proposing. I thought that you were proposing to change some of the industrial to multifamily residential. But you are correct. In our River District commercial zone, which is, again, it's the freeway commercial in the River District, they actually do allow housing. And so if that is something that you would like to see, that is, as a planning commission, moving towards more mixed use, even in the industrial zones. We have mixed use zones. We actually saw that Meadowood Technology Campus had originally been zoned light industrial, and that was changed to a mixed use precisely because they wanted to provide that mix. And that is certainly something that when we get into the land use chapter, and we will make a note of this, that let's have let's have a little bit more discussion. I think that you're right. If we open that up, it does create the potential and frankly, the benefits from a reduction of vehicle miles traveled is huge. So
It affects a lot of issues, climate,
great suggestion.
infrastructure, transportation, all that good stuff is positively affected. My only other comment, and I mentioned this a couple of times, this thing about, the state asking us to allow ADUs on all these lots. I have a real hard, I've seen it really turn neighborhoods sideways. And there have been comments that, well, we have HOAs and CCNRs that don't allow that. That comment's been made here. Well, how many HOAs do we have? Have we looked at the CCNRs? Do we know for sure that they don't allow that? I haven't done it. I don't know if anybody here has done that.
So some of them don't, some of them do.
Okay.
And but a lot of them, a lot of the ones that don't, again, the example I would give you is in the River District. We don't see a prohibition in the CCNRs on ADUs. However, those are by design much smaller lots, so it makes it much more challenging. And frankly, I think and I know that Legacy Ridge's CCNRs, it
We've got a
doesn't.
maximum unit count. I mean, we can't go there with Legacy Ridge.
You have a maximum unit count, what, in the
zone.
subdivision?
It's a PUD, so we have a maximum number of units. Correct me if I'm wrong. Adding additional dwelling units runs against that maximum.
So again, this is a state law that's saying, oh, any place where you have a residential, you can do, you may, if you have CCNRs that prohibit it now, that's fine. The other reality is that you've got some honking big houses up there that could easily be divided into additional granny flats or attached ADUs without even an impact on the appearance or the functionality of your development.
Well, in some jurisdictions, what they do is they say, okay, we like the idea of ADUs. I built an ADU for my mom. And it was a great way to keep her close, keep an eye on her. But what they do is they typically say, okay, these are the minimum lot sizes for ADUs. And based upon this lot size, you can have this size of a unit. My lot was 15,000 square feet and the maximum size ADU was 650 square feet. I think maybe this is a good idea with some additional controls put in place so that we don't get carried away in situations where people are putting tiny homes on lots that are really small.
But we
And
don't
that's
have a
But we
choice.
don't have a choice. That's the.
It's not,
state
they're not asking,
legislation
they're telling.
requires us, and they're telling us what the standards
My
have to
point
be.
here is, at what point do we say to these people, our dear friends at the Department of Commerce and the state, okay, we don't want to go that way because we have an established community with high value. People like it here. We don't want to do that. And at what point do we just swallow everything they give us, or do we just at some point say enough is enough?
So that is.
That is not a question for this commission, frankly. It
It's-
isn't.
It isn't. That's
It's not a question for this
city council,
commission.
that
Well-
the city council may decide that they don't care about grant funding for anything. They could make that decision. We could be out of compliance with it. But what's interesting about the way the legislation is written is if we don't change our code to be consistent with this legislation, it de facto goes into effect. And so if we denied a building permit for something that meets the requirements of this,
Okay.
we will get sued and we will be forced to approve that because the state law will supersede our zoning rules if we do not, if we do not implement these.
And the
So I
only
don't-
change is to allow, not to require.
Exactly.
So we're not
And-
requiring this.
The market-
That's what I
market
was just
will-
gonna
So
throw
we
out.
do have a choice.
We do.
Well,
We-
the market has a choice. We don't have a choice regarding including it in our zoning, but that doesn't mean that that is what's going to be built.
From a regulatory environment, we have no choice, but the market. can
Well, I think
decide.
there are two things that we talked about. The one was, certain HOAs don't allow them. The other thing is that, right now, they're cost prohibitive because they require separate water, sewer, utility hookups.
And a river district, CCNRs don't even mention this. It's just not prohibited there.
Right.
So
Which is, right.
Can I add?
Lisa,
Yes, Sharifa.
yeah, if I may just interject with a little more details about the state requirements. So when it comes to unit size, the ADU size, we are allowed to cap that at 1,000 square feet. So that's one thing that Commerce provides some limitations to or optionality to play with within the city's code. So some cities keep it an open-ended. You can build an ADU whatever size you want, but we can cap it at 1,000 square feet. And I understand it's larger than the 600 square foot that was spoken about, but we do have that optionality to include or exclude. So that's one of the notes in the legislation. The other thing is, and maybe this is something that is not currently too applicable to Liberty Lake because we don't have minimum lot size requirements, but the ADU legislation says you are required to allow for ADUs on lots that meet the minimum lot required. So one route, if the city has a concern about overcrowding in areas where the lots are already too small, you can choose to set a new minimum lot requirement where you exclude certain lots from building ADUs in the future. But that's an exclusion that you're going to bring now to properties that had always been in compliance. So that's a different battle that you need to deal with. But there are avenues for us to work through the code amendments to give us a little more just leeway in designing a code that works for what Liberty Lake wants for its future.
Yeah, there is also, we only have to allow, we don't have to allow them on lots that are less than, and I can't remember whether it's 2,000 or 1,000 square feet, but it's a pretty small lot.
It's a pretty small lot, yes.
Lisa?
Yeah.
I also remember a day on this commission last go around, we had a conversation about percentage of property coverage on these smaller lots. Now, how does that play into this equation? Because I'm pretty sure there's a percentage of house, garage, patios, so on, that can cover the footprint of the lot. And in my mind, if you're beyond that maximum, then that's going to determine whether you can have an ADU or not.
I believe that we are still able to do that, so we're able to maintain that. However, it may be something that gets challenged. And Sharifa, do you have?
Yes. Yeah, I can chime in on that.
Asking
So you're correct. So if the existing house already gets to that limit of allowable lot coverage, someone can still have the opportunity of, say, converting their garage or doing an attached unit with a portion of their house that's already built, just changing that, separating, adding a new entrance and doing that. But their existing lot coverage, yes, it may exclude them from being able to build a new ADU. So the ADU still must comply with existing regulations. But as Lisa said, those regulations apply to both the single family home as well as the ADU or the middle housing regulations. It has to be the same universal regulations.
And just one other observation, if I can, it leads right into what I wanted to say quickly. there's 11 required and 15 optional.
Mhm.
So if you don't like it, call your legislator.
Thank you. So with that, I think, if anyone has any other comments, we can, continue this, or we can go on to the next topic. I was challenged by, one of your fellow commissioners to, follow the example led by Amy in, getting through this quickly, so. I'm gonna turn it over to, Sharifa. And here we go. Oh, wait, then I actually have the introduction here.
Mhm.
So, I wanted to give you a context. So we are talking about, the housing and community service element now, and we're gonna focus specifically today on goals and policies, but I did want to give you a little context because I gave you some red lines that are just the beginnings of the chapter. And so we talked about early on as we were developing the work plan for our comprehensive plan, we talked about combining both the housing element with the community service element of the comp plan. We had a very skinny community service element. And as we look at issues around affordability and around the transitional, permanent, supportive, and emergency housing, it seemed to make sense to combine the two and consider them together. And you'll see that some of the policies, as we were approaching this, you'll see some new policies under community service that actually is attempting to address some of the affordability issues as well. And so I thought that there was a lot of value to combining these two. So as with all the chapters, as you've seen with some of the other chapters that you have reviewed thus far, we are moving the goals from chapter 2 into the appropriate chapters. So you're going to see both housing and community service goals that we're going to focus on today. The initial body is of the text from the original from the comp plan, the existing comp plan, is not in red line format because what we did was we merged and streamlined and provided a summary of information from the last comp plan. And so the entire chapter would be red line because we're trying to blend these two together and make them more cohesive. And so I also want to say that red lines of edited goals and policies reflect legislative mandates and other strategies that you have initially identified as recommended. And Sharifa, in going through this, has really helped to provide us with a context. Those goals and policies that are related to required code revisions, she's highlighted in yellow. So we can hopefully not waste a lot of energy on something that is beyond our control.
What is the green highlight?
Recommend.
The green,
I can explain the green highlight. This was in the drafts that were going on between our team and Lisa. So the green highlighted ones were the ones that were from the original draft that made it into this current draft. And then you have the ones that are not highlighted at all. Those are new ones that reflect only recommendations, not requirements.
That's not how I read the email, I guess.
so next, I want to talk about just what is required to be in this element, just to give you a context, because the goals and policies are critical to kind of guiding how we write the document as well. So obviously goals and policies are required.
Lisa, I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood. I want to make sure I get this right as we go through this. in the document that's been provided,
Yes.
the items that are red text came from where?
So please, Sharifa, if you would, please.
Yes. So the red text Microsoft Word has this track changes feature to it. So as we add a new text, that text is going to be red. So sometimes you'll see a sentence that's in black and then one word is in red. That's us just updating that one word. The highlights, you have the yellow, reflect policies that will lead into required changes. The green reflect recommendations that were existing in the original draft. And then the not highlighted ones are also recommendations, but they're new ones that were added just into this. They're added into this draft and being reviewed by you all for the first time.
And so, and it, just to clarify, when we scoped this with Sharifa and her team, staff had a pretty robust list of recommended changes based upon challenges with implementing the code. So, so Sharifa had included those recommended by staff.
Okay, yeah, perfect, thank you.
So, but getting back to this, my apologies, I didn't mean to run over you on that
No,
one.
no,
So goals and policies obviously are required. We are required to address the housing needs assessment by income level and the residential land capacity, and you've already seen that. We've got the technical memo. I need to now summarize that information in this chapter. Also, adequate provisions. We need to demonstrate that we're making adequate provisions to address existing and projected housing needs for all income levels. And so that is also some of what we need to address. We have the adequate provisions memo, and we've had some conversations about the implementation strategies. We also do have to, you reviewed the memo on racially disparate impacts, exclusion, and displacement risk. I'm going to be providing a high-level summary in the element in the chapter. That'll be an appendix to the document. And so again, that is required in this element. We didn't find a lot of substantive. Probably the biggest barrier to inclusivity, if you will, is really just the affordability of housing, and so we're addressing that. We're addressing that with these goals and policies. So with that, that's the context of this element, and now the meat of it really is the goals and policies. And that's, by the way, nobody reads the document. They read the goals and policies. They look at the map.
Right.
So other than Commerce will read it. All right, with that, Sharifa, if I can, oh my goodness. You are up.
All right. So we'll be talking about the draft housing goals and policies, and I will walk through them one by one. They reflect the strategy changes that we were talking about over the past couple of months. And I invite you all to just stop me at any point and we can talk about each one of them as you please. So we can go to the next slide. Before we dive into the goals and policies themselves, I just wanted to give a primer on the difference between what goals are and what policies are. So goals are the big picture idea. They just state our objective or intended desired outcome. So this is an example on this slide that says, provide a range of housing options to address the needs of all economic segments of the community. It doesn't say how, it just says what we want to achieve. Policies go into the next step. So they create the framework to bring those goals closer to reality. So think goal is a big umbrella, policies are underneath that, and then branching from the policies, we have the strategies that lead into actual code changes. So a couple of examples of policies that would relate to that initial goal. they could be two different types of policies. It could be an intent policy, which is softer, or it could be an action policy, which is a harder, uses harder language. So the intent example you have here, it says encourage townhouses and multifamily development that have a similar design and scale as the surrounding neighborhood. If we want to use stronger language, we would say something to the extent of like allow or enforce or support, where you go into actual active promotion of these types of developments in order to get us closer to that goal. So with this primer, are there any questions, or can we move to the goals on the next slide? All right. So we distilled our housing goals to 3. 2 of them, we had some version of them in the previous comprehensive plan, and we just made a little updates to them. That's why you see the combination of the black text and some red wording. And then the 3rd goal is entirely new. So the first goal we have is to preserve the aesthetic of existing neighborhoods and support high quality new development. We know this is essential for Liberty Lake. We know Liberty Lake takes a lot of pride of beautiful architecture and good design. So we wanted to carry this forward as a first goal. The second goal is to enhance housing availability and affordability for all economic segments of the population. So this is similar to what we had in this previous example. It goes to the affordability discussion that we've been talking about, and then increasing the housing options that we have. And then the 3rd goal that we have is to accommodate supportive and emergency housing facilities and support housing for populations with special needs. So since we've been talking a lot about updating our regulations that relates to these items, we figured it's good to add a section within our housing policy, within our housing element that talks specifically about those goals and policies. So are there any questions about the 3 housing goals?
Yeah, please tell me how we measure that we've achieved the goal.
Well, for measurements, that depends. So when we set, it's hard to measure goals themselves. You measure the policies. So, measure the strategies. So not yet the policies. So as I said earlier, goal is the big picture idea. Policies start setting the framework for how we get closer to achieving these goals. And then strategies guide actual actions. And then those actions are the things that we can measure. So we can say, we can set specific targets, or we can say, change this code to allow this. And that's very clear and measurable in certain cases. And then in other areas, you have things that are less measurable, where it's more like encourage, promote, and you just add certain things in your code that simplify certain procedures. Lisa, you wanted to add to this?
Yes, I did want to add that for each of these chapters, we've talked about the fact that we're going to be providing an implementation section. And the implementation section in this really will attempt to be more specific about some of the things that we're going to do. And it's going to set the table. In 5 years, we have to come back and say, how are we doing on our implementation? So that will be maybe the most challenging part of the whole document, because it's not something that we've really done before, but it's probably the most meaningful part of a plan, is to lay out what your implementation strategy is.
Right. Okay. So next we'll get into the policies. We'll go into each goal and talk about the policies for that specific goal. So we can go to the next slide, talking about goal number 1, which is preserve the aesthetic of existing neighborhoods and support high quality new development. So we have 4 policies under this goal. The first one is to encourage infill development within existing residential neighborhood that is compatible with surrounding structures and uses and is consistent with neighborhood design. So I'll just pause for a second and then I'll go into reading the next one. If anyone has any questions or concerns about this one, please don't hesitate to raise them. The next policy is to encourage integrated neighborhood developments that protect the environment, provide usable open space, and exhibit exceptional quality and design. And this, as you can see, this is in black text. So this was from the previous document that was brought forward, and we decided to carry it into the new housing element draft.
So Sharifa, when you say integrated, are you referring to what follows there? The neighborhood developments, protect the environment, provide usable space, and is that what you mean by integrated?
Yes. So for example, if you have a subdivision.
Okay, then
Yeah.
let's just say encourage neighborhoods,
Mhm.
neighborhood developments that protect that, because I think that that's a superfluous word in there that has a bunch of different meanings. So,
Right.
I
So
would-
we can take it out. Is
Right.
that what you're suggesting?
yes, please.
I think
Okay.
it's a Great suggestion. And one of the things, there are a lot of superfluous words in the
Yes.
old comp.
All right, we'll take this one out. Okay, next slide, please. So we're still on policies for the same goal number 1. So the next policy is maintain incentives to encourage cluster development while preserving open space and protecting critical areas. So it has similar features of the last policy that we just talked about, but this is more specific to cluster development, where we bring the housing elements closer to each other, so you have more substantial open space.
What's interesting about this one is that it is an existing goal, and it really speaks to the concept of cottage housing. And while we have a definition for cottage housing in our development code, we have no regulations around it. But Commerce has been very generous in providing us with some good suggestions.
Right. And then lastly, we have a new addition, which is maintain architectural design standards that provide detailed human scale design while allowing flexibility to use a variety of building styles. So this reflects existing design standards. So we're just saying carry those forward, maintain them. Occasional revisions can be done to those every once in a while, but having those in the code is good because not all municipalities have design standards.
Comment. Having had the luxury of being exposed to the term human scale design, can you explain to me what that really means? Because, and the reason why I'm asking the question is, as a builder, I've built homes that has a ceiling height inside the front door of 20 feet, and that's not human scale design.
So
According to some, that's why I'm asking
first
the question.
of all, we don't have design standards for residential units.
I understand. I'm
Okay,
just
so, but
using the term.
secondly, there is an outstanding definition. It's a very explicit definition within our development code for human scale. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that.
Okay,
And it's actually got some good graphics associated with it.
thank you. Appreciate it.
And then after you've done that,
Hmm.
when
Bring it
we
back.
circle back, I'd like to hear your thoughts on
I
it.
will.
All right, if there are no other questions, we can move to goal number 2.
Charlie?
Yeah, I'm looking at this. And I'm looking at this matrix that we went through earlier this evening. And I look at the wording, which is great. I think this is really well written. I like it. Goal 1, I like it. I like what it says, but I'm having a difficult time squaring that with what's in this matrix. If you really follow along with what's in the matrix in terms of duplexes, increasing density, I think you're going to get away from what is written here. It's one, this says one thing, this is really nice, but the reality is, if you follow along with what the state wants and what's on here, I don't think you can get there from there.
I think we were trying to target it with the first policy. So if we can go back up one slide, that first one talks about this infill development, but we want to ensure that we are still compatible with the surrounding scale. We still carry the same level of design and care into these developments. But that we used this first one to capture what the state is requiring from us, but do it in a way that is suitable for development and the vision that Liberty Lake wants for itself.
And again, I think Charlie, Phil raised a really good point of using, regarding using the, building lot coverages as a way to kind of still maintain that character. And I think that, I think that, it will help manage the market's, demands, if you will. So that is the art of this. And why right now we're talking about goals and policies. We will get to the implementation strategies, and they will include some of the development code things. And we really need to be creative where we can be to try and I said this along, probably the biggest challenge of this comprehensive plan is balancing the mandates with the community's vision. And so it's a heavy lift. It is a heavy lift.
Yes. I agree. Okay, sorry.
No problem. Okay, moving on to goal number 2, which was enhance housing availability and affordability for all economic segments of the population. So a lot of what we've been talking about over the past couple of months falls under this goal. And you'll see a lot of the highlighted ones are also specific to this goal number 2. So the first one says, allow various types of suitable scale housing, including cottage-style housing, duplexes, and other 2-unit housing configurations to be built within low-density residential zones. So this speaks specifically to the middle housing that we need to enforce. This is why you see the first word in this policy is allow. We know that this is something that we need to do. So we need to get towards incorporating that within our code. And then we try to be specific about the 2-unit housing configurations because this is what's required of Liberty Lake. Okay. Next one is periodically review and update development requirements and design standards for accessory dwelling units. So this was partially included in the previous plan. We just added a little to it because we are talking not just about the requirements that are within for the ADU itself, but there were additional general development requirements like, hey, your house can't be larger or your house can't be smaller than this for you to build an ADU. So those we have to take out of our existing code. Okay. The next one is periodically review and update residential parking standards. And this, as you can see, it's high level. So it just says residential parking standards. Let's look at all of them every once in a while. We know this will lead into required changes. For example, when it comes to middle housing, when it comes to ADUs, but it also invites us to occasionally look at housing for other facilities, for multifamily housing, which we did. We reviewed it in this process that we were looking at, and then we decided against changing those requirements. So what this policy says is just look at those every once in a while. Just review them, assess their viability, and make a decision about that. It is highlighted in yellow because it relates to some required changes, but it doesn't only include required changes. All right, the next one is support more affordable home ownership by streamlining the subdivision and condominiumization processes. So we know this is part of the both the ADU and middle housing legislation for us to revise the subdivision process and allow condominiumization. So we're doing that, just framing this policy in that this will support more affordable home ownership for folks.
What is a condominiumization process?
So to turn individual units into condominiums, it can happen with a 0 lot line type of
That's not what I thought it
configuration.
was, but I've never heard the word.
It's, yeah, I've actually heard it before. It is a real word.
Is it real? Okay,
It's,
fine.
we don't have anything in our regulations related to it because we just point to the RCWs. You can do it, the RCWs define it very well. However, there is some specific things that we have to do related to unit lot subdivision, and that's a way more complicated concept. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but there are some requirements related to that we will have to do, and we will have to, I think that we will likely explicitly address condominiumization by referencing the RCW. But as I said, we really do allow it right now. We just say, yeah, you follow that.
Let them deal with it.
Yes.
All right,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
no worries. Next one is utilize objective design review processes to streamline permitting and approvals of residential developments. So this is highlighted in yellow because it is required that we use objective design review processes for middle housing, like the duplexes and the ADUs. But in our discussion and recommendations, we said we're gonna aim to utilize these types of review processes even for multifamily developments, just to streamline the process.
Just observation, item number 5 is not highlighted on our
Yeah.
packet. If you use this as a reference to later.
Sharifa, did you want that to be highlighted in our?
Yes, yeah, and we'll update it. And there's a couple of wording changes that we made 2 days ago and small updates that maybe not reflected on the packet that you all received last week. But what's on the slide is the most current.
And what I will say is that this one also, so this applies to some things that we're required to do, but it's also something that we've talked about, that we have our design, architectural design standards are really dated. And so it's one of those things that will be in the implementation chapter to update it probably won't happen with the first round of code revisions, but it's probably something that's going to be a longer process for us. But we will, so the first round will just do what we have to do.
And also, I want to add that these highlights, those won't carry forward into the housing element itself. It's really just for the continuation of our discussion with you all, so you know which ones were driven by things that we know we are required to make. But in the housing element itself, none of these will be highlighted. We can focus on in the implementation strategies to be a little more specific, like this is required and we're going to implement by a certain deadlines or so on or so forth. But for the policies themselves, they won't be differentiated between what is required and what is recommended, because policies themselves are not regulatory statements. They're just creating a framework to guide our regulations. All right. So the next one says expand allowable housing options such as tiny homes, cottage clusters, and co-living developments in medium density residential and mixed use zoning districts to promote a variety of densities and housing types. So this one you can see we unhighlighted the tiny homes and cottage clusters here because those are not required, but as part of our recommendations discussions, we decided to carry them forward and allow them in the mixed use and medium density areas. But from our recent research, we know that co-living, we are required to allow it in those districts. So that's why this statement is partially highlighted.
Could you add the industrial district into that?
The light industrial district, we
Yeah.
could, or we could add a different one to suggest that we expand the areas where mixed use development is allowed. That would be an appropriate strategy under this
Now, looking at that bill that we got,
policy.
that's kind of where they were going with this, I think, mixed use and
Mm-hmm.
industrial. Multifamily, anything more than, that would allow more than 6 units. Nope, we don't have any minimum lot sizes, so I think it would be a good idea, light industrial. And any other district where you got a housing need and Closeness to employment.
Expand, so how's this? Expand opportunities for mixed use development in light industrial zones. Does
Or you
every-
could just add light industrial zones to this right after mixed use, which is what I think Charlie was asking.
Okay, and mixed use and.
Yeah, and then you don't have to
mixed use
repeat.
Industrial zones.
I think that's better. That would.
Okay, all right, all right. So that's.
Just a quick comment on adding industrial. I think you're gonna get a lot of pushback from businesses on that. Because they're not gonna want the traffic, the parking problems that come with multifamily housing in an industrial area. That is gonna get in the way of doing business, and that concerns me.
Isn't it an option? It's not a
It's,
mandate.
it's already an option in River District Freeway Commercial.
It's not a requirement.
It's not a requirement, it's an
Not a
allowance.
requirement, but just thinking if a developer wants to do that, what other surrounding businesses are going to object to that? I'm just putting it out there because if I owned a business, that I knew I was gonna have multiple vehicle trips every day and parking issues and everything that people can't even get to my business, I'm gonna have a problem with that.
Mhm.
So I just see that as a potential issue that we need to think about.
I will say this also, is that with the entitlement that we have right now in the areas where we anticipate multifamily to be developed, expanding multifamily into light industrial areas as opposed to allowing them to do a zone change. And that's why I think it almost begs to be more of a discussion as part of the land use chapter. But,
But isn't that essentially what mixed use is, Lisa?
yes, yes.
Well, that's mixed use, but mixed use isn't light industrial. Those are,
Well,
Well,
I think.
allowing, right, and so, but, so we don't have that much, if you remember the land capacity analysis, we don't have that much vacant. What effectively is gonna happen is this is gonna happen anyhow if there is adaptive reuse of buildings. But we do, there's a mechanism for that to happen if the property owner wants to see that happen in terms of just doing a zone change.
It's not
And
re-
probably the
requirement,
most
it's a question
logical,
for him.
right,
If he can.
Just an
address the
allowance.
Issues of traffic and whatnot.
right.
No.
Just something to think about.
Yeah, no, it's,
And we should discuss it.
okay,
All right.
all right.
Next slide, please.
That's interesting.
Okay, so now we go into ones that are not highlighted on this slide. So all of these relate to just recommendations, and you can see some of them are new text and some of them are text that was carried from the original draft. So the first one we see here is encourage medium and high density development by periodically reviewing and updating the standards for multifamily, mixed use, and manufactured homes. So this encompasses a lot of the recommendations that we talked about. So when we refer to the manufactured home standards, so this falls under this one. When we talked about the vertical mixed use requirements, this will also fall under this policy. And multifamily requirements, we don't necessarily have any recommendations that we're moving forward with. But again, what this policy is saying is says periodically review and update your standards for those. So this is what it's suggesting.
So you consider manufactured homes as medium to high density residential?
Well, it depends on their sizes. So, for example, tiny homes are often manufactured homes or prefabricated developments. So manufactured homes can fall in under the medium and high density development, but you can also have manufactured home parks that are very low density. So they can fall within this. I appreciate your point and happy to take a discussion on separating this into a different policy that doesn't specifically set the density, or we can keep it here within this one. Any thoughts on this one?
I go back to how, what's the exposure, what's the available lands for manufactured homes?
Well, so manufactured homes could become, and let's not even talk about the RVs.
Yeah, right, but I'm just, some of these
Um, ma-
questions that come up, I wonder.
So the manufactured homes are a viable type of ADU potentially, particularly the tiny homes.
Okay.
And so I think that, I think that, by changing those standards, we provide an opportunity for those to be incorporated. And I think that there is the potential for a lot of demand for ADUs in the future.
And we have zoning for that. Correct?
We have zoning, wait,
We have available lands in the proper zoning to allow that.
manufactured homes are allowed on any, and have to be allowed on any lot that allows a stick-built home.
Okay. Well, then
And and that's been that way for a long
No,
time,
I
so I just
understand, but
want to
then you
say
go to
that
the
you
ne-
haven't seen it
then you go to the
actually
next
happen.
question, does it make sense economically for the landowner, for whoever I mean, there's all it's
We don't
not
have any-
just a cut and dried, I guess is what I'm trying to
We
say.
don't have any manufactured home parks
I know.
in the city. We have a manufactured home subdivision
Right.
in the city. One of the things I will say, and this is, and I've been saying this for a lot of years, manufactured homes charade as affordable housing. They don't have the maintenance, the maintenance required, the longevity in manufactured home parks, the instability of the leasing of that lot, and the cost of leasing that lot, the energy efficiency of manufactured homes, all of those things really make it not as affordable as it may appear on the face of it.
And that's what brings me to my question. We're all talking about this for 5 minutes now and the applicability of it and the logical, economical sense of it. I mean, what is the likelihood that somebody's going to do that with available lands? That it would require us to have its own separate. I thought I heard break it out into a separate
Policy.
policy, yeah.
Well, all we're really doing though is following the law.
Right.
Whether it really happens or not,
That's
I
correct.
agree with you. I think the chances of it happening are slim,
Slim.
but we still have to allow for it.
I understand.
I get
Do
that.
we
point.
need a separate policy just for that? I'm not convinced, but
I'm not convinced. I think that while it has the potential to encourage higher density, I'm not sure that it's necessarily applicable in encouraging medium and high density.
Right.
It almost doesn't fit.
So we can do, Lisa, is similar to how we have a simple clause for periodically revised parking standards. We can pull the manufactured homes and just say periodically review and update manufactured home standards. And then this way we're not also lumping the manufactured homes under the umbrella of encourage, because if we don't really see it as the best option for folks looking for affordable options, we may not want to have the manufactured home in a sentence that says encourage.
How about if we just add it to policy number 2, periodically review and update development requirements and design standards for accessory dwelling units and manufactured homes.
That's.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll do that.
Good boy.
That's why you're the smart one in the group.
Agree.
Makes sense.
Okay, so the next one, we have balanced housing affordability with environmental integrity, neighborhood aesthetics, and public resources and housing regulations. So this is a policy that we had from the previous plan, and it talks about we want to make sure that we care about the environment and we're not encroaching upon sensitive areas, but we also have to take into consideration the supply of homes and adequate land available for that. So it's just a balance. It's a very high level statement.
Can I speak to this one?
Mhm.
I had this one highlighted for discussion. Recently, I've heard words like subjective and objective last night. Flowery language versus definition. I look at this, as I look at all the other policies under the goal, the first few words give me a direct action. Okay, but this paragraph number 8, or this policy number 8 is very general, as she just identified. It's very general in nature, doesn't really specify the policy action. So I would propose that we just strike the whole line.
And I think that's fine. This,
Agreed.
we kept this is from the original one.
I
The
know it
only
is, yeah.
word was,
Right.
that we changed was character to aesthetics, but I would agree with you. It's not really a very substantive one.
It's really not. The others all are, if you read the first 3 words, it's utilize, it's expand, it's encourage, it's promote, it's, those are all direct.
We're not doing gymnastics here, just
Yeah.
balancing. Yes.
Just my thoughts. Thanks, Amy.
All right. So the next one is promote the preservation of existing housing units that provide affordable options for households through partnership with other agencies to provide loans, grants, and other programs. And I will note that maybe the document that you got last week has language that's slightly different, but we recently added in discussions with Lisa this statement about partnership with other agencies to provide loans, grants, and other programs. So the burden doesn't become on the city itself, but on these partnerships.
Again, my thought on that was that we're too small of a city to independently run programs like this ourselves, but we do have the ability to partner. And we actually have some monies from sales tax for the 1460 that probably generate maybe $50,000 a year. That isn't a lot in and of itself for us, but it does give us the potential to partner with other agencies who actually have the expertise and capacity to provide this in a broader region.
Makes sense.
All right, next slide, please. So we have periodically assessed the effects of policies and regulations on housing affordability and fair housing choice and reduce regulatory barriers where necessary. So this was also a policy that was carried from the previous plan, and it's a big picture review of existing policies as well. All right, and the last one we have under goal number 2 is relax design and development standards for adaptive reuse to support the conversion of existing underutilized this should say non-residential buildings. Sorry, that was my bad. Non-residential buildings into housing developments. And this speaks directly to the adaptive reuse conversation that we've had previously. All right, moving on to goal number 3. So just a reminder, that goal said accommodate supportive and emergency housing facilities and support housing for populations with special needs. So the first policy we're proposing here is to periodically review and update developments and parking standards for emergency and supportive housing projects and facilities. So you'll see we highlighted a portion of this because we know we need to make revisions to the occupancy standards to meet legislation. But we also made recommendations of updating the parking standards that are not required changes, but we are going to move forward based on the recommendations from this body. The next one is to support initiatives by low-income housing advocacy organizations. So similar to what we said in the previous goal, just if we have organizations and opportunities to partner, we'll just support those initiatives. And this one is carried from the previous plan. Next one is ensure a continuum of allowable housing options for special needs populations through periodic policy reviews. This is an overall policy review of the existing standards from that specific special need populations lens. Right, the next one is to promote housing development accessible to public transportation for individuals with mobility challenges. And this was also carried from the previous plan.
Rachel, can we go back to that last one where you start off with insure? We had the discussion
Yeah,
in another
insurance is
setting. Well, you're the one that brought it up, so I just, unless you're trying to change words, support to me would be more doable, because how are we going to ensure anything?
Exactly.
And we can support them.
That's a good point.
Surprised I didn't catch that one.
Well, I'm just saying, you taught us well.
Number 7 too.
Oh, that was the one I caught, so,
Yep.
Okay, you're right, so. It's hard to read through the green.
It is.
Wait, am I going to? Oh, okay, this is where we are.
Yes. All right, we're on the middle one in this page. So we have support both rental and ownership forms of affordable housing in a variety of types and sizes. And then we have support a range of housing types for retirees and seniors, including condominiums, assisted living, co- and independent living communities, near daily needs, and transit. Next slide. So we have ensure that zoning districts allow emergency and supportive housing facilities to include related offices and provide on-site services. So I'd say with this one, ensure is an adequate word here because we know that this is something that we discussed and there's a clear path for how we can implement this by updating our zoning requirements. And then lastly, we have a much softer language. Consider introducing temporary or short-term rental programs as transitional housing options for specific groups. So this just presents the idea of thinking and considering these programs, potentially conducting studies, looking at good examples of where this is implemented, but just pushing the city towards starting to think and consider this option. All right, I think this was the last of the housing goals and policies. Any questions or comments before?
You ready to jump to community service goals? So we had 2 goals under community service, and as you can see, the red lines are what you're used to. We had some minor changes. Enhance the quality of life for all City of Liberty Lake residents. Again, it's enhance the quality of life for all City of Liberty Lake residents. And goal number 2 is to facilitate programs addressing city residents' basic human needs, including food, clothing, shelter, primary health care, transportation, and protection from abuse. Again, minor changes to the existing goals. And under the policies, we've added a few, trying to, again, recognizing, and I want to make this point, recognizing that pretty much anyone below 50% median income is going to require some sort of subsidized or permanent supportive housing. That's just a reality. And so we're not, unless we give some thought to the services and the partnerships that we can establish, we're never going to be effective in addressing housing needs for that population. So goal or policy number 1, partner with human service agencies and not-for-profits specializing in emergency housing, transitional and supportive housing services, and housing subsidies for low-income residents to improve housing affordability. Again, we're too small of a city to do that ourselves, but there's lots of different agencies that do have that capability.
And
Yes.
would we be some more supporting those partnerships as opposed to partnering ourselves?
We could add the word support and partner because
Because we're not a primary partner.
Well, that was kind of my question, is there's two, policy 1 and 6 talk about partner. So does that mean that, I mean, since it's a policy, is that saying that every agency, nonprofit wants to do any of those items, we're required to partner with, or is? No, I think the answer is no.
I think the answer is no. So,
Right.
but we can make it more explicit. So,
I don't know.
we could exploring partnerships.
There you go.
That's not, it doesn't take it far enough though.
No,
Yeah, but are we in the business of promoting these things?
What about just support instead of partner with? We
Yeah,
just say
that's what
support
I'm-
human service agencies.
all right.
Yeah.
We're already using
Okay.
support in number 2.
Yeah, well, we may be using it throughout, because I think changing the words changes the meaning.
right. Support. Sounds
Support
good.
human service agencies. Okay, got it. The next one is support public transit system to reduce transportation costs and improve access to essential services. And it may even be supporting the expansion of the public transit. Would you say that it's the expansion, supporting the expansion? Which, by the way, we do.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we do.
Yeah, I agree.
So I just didn't want to put words in your mouth. Okay, foster strong community school relationships by minimizing travel distance for education and facilitate collaboration between city staff and school staff. And I think that happens quite regularly. And it's one of the reasons why we see Central Valley School District really preferring to develop schools in our community.
Mhm.
Enabling nonprofits and human service providers to use public facilities for community meetings and events. Can we do that? Identify and support programs addressing human service needs. I guess I have to move the, okay, so identify and support programs addressing human service needs in public and private resources. Or you can't see the, with public and private resources. And promoting and partnering with agencies and nonprofits that provide weatherproofing and housing rehabilitation assistance for senior citizens and lower income residents living in older housing stock.
Yeah, number 5. I don't know, are you going to identify or are you just going to support?
Yeah.
All right, we can do that.
And 6 is gonna be support agencies or promote and support.
So
I think if
this
you're
is
gonna support it,
actually-
you're gonna promote it. You're gonna do this, Same kind of the same
Well,
thing.
I guess maybe it's, one of the things that I was thinking with this particular one is this is also a code enforcement issue. So it's something we could use our code enforcement officer when we come across these things to actually connect people with the services. That was the thought process. But you tell me.
No,
I guess I don't understand why support doesn't accomplish that goal.
It does.
It does. And when we say we're going to promote something, it's like we're going to ensure something too. How are we going to do that? Are we actively going to promote it?
Right.
And what does that look like? When we support it, we're supporting what they're doing.
And, or more than supporting. As the case may be. So advocate for affordable healthcare access for low-income, elderly, and disabled residents.
I don't think we're in the business of advocacy either.
I'm trying to remember what let me see.
We'll have an argument with the city council the next go around about advocating for things.
Mm.
And I think the original wording was support,
Support works.
support affordable healthcare access for low income.
And for the next one.
Support for number 8 also.
Hmm.
Okay, and I'm not keeping up on the slide, my apologies. So support caregiver relief programs, including parenting and elder support. And anticipate future needs through regular community trend analyses and stakeholder engagement.
How about plan for?
All right.
We're getting kind of nebulous on our words as we go down there.
Yeah, well, we didn't have a lot of substantive stuff in here.
It goes down.
I told you this was a weak chapter. So that, when we bring this back, and we'll have more red lines when we bring it back, but we'll also have edits to the goals and policies. That was what we hoped to accomplish with this today, was to get through a first cut of these. When we bring them back, there may be some additional, wordsmithing and whatnot. That's the nature of these things. But again, really appreciate all of the good work that we accomplished today. And I'm going to very quickly take you through an overview of the co-housing requirements. So first of all, co-living housing means a residential development with sleeping units that are independently rented and lockable while providing living and sleeping space. And residents typically share kitchen facilities with other sleeping units in the building. And the synonyms, statisticians and love to refer to congregate living facilities. Planners like to talk about single room occupancy, but other synonyms are rooming houses, boarding houses, lodging houses, residential suites. Probably every one of us who went to college lived in one of these at some point in our college career.
We called it cohabiting.
Yeah, exactly. There's that too. That's fair enough. And the reality is that because we can't limit the number of unrelated people living in a single family household. The reality is that almost any single family home could potentially be this.
Why can't you regulate that?
Because the state says so. I will send you the citation.
I should have known.
I'll give you the RCW on that one.
In many jurisdictions, it's like 5 unrelated individuals.
Well, it was, they raised it to 8 several years ago, but they have since said you just cannot. And by the way, it is actually nearly impossible to enforce anyhow. So it's, So this is the law, the RCW that requires us to adopt this by December 31st, 2025. If we don't, it's what they call a preemptive, and we automatically have to follow the rules created that are in the RCW. And we could be sued if we don't. So that, I mean, this is, many of the housing regulations are like that. Not all of them, but many of them. So we must allow co-living housing on any lot that allows for 6 multifamily housing units. So that's all of the River District. All of the River District. It is R3. It is M2 and M3. So that's it cannot require standards that are more restrictive than that required for other multifamily residential uses. It cannot require more than 0.25 off-street parking spaces per sleeping unit. It cannot require any off-street parking spaces if it's within half a mile of a major transit stop. And so I just want, and the definition of major transit stop is that 5 days a week during the week, or during weekdays, 5 hours a day, you have 15-minute transit service. And so I just wanted to share with you, I actually looked this up. Where did I write it down?
Transit service every 15 minutes within a 5-hour period.
Yes, that's what's considered, that's what it's talking about for the major transit. So this is what I have to say though. So Route 74 is now becoming Route 73 and 93. So that's the one that runs on the Mission Avenue north of the freeway. That's going to become high performance transit in September, which is the 15-minute service. Route 172 is going to become Route 722. That's the one that takes you downtown. It's already HPT. And Route 98, which is Country Vista and Appleway, going out Country Vista and Appleway to Green Acres. That is planned as a high performance transit. So we don't know when, but so just to give you a sense about what, and we'll just use the language the way it says it, but over time we're going to see high performance transit throughout the city. So was my point. Anyhow, we have to do this by December 31st. So on the I highlighted these on the tentative comp plan meeting schedule. I tried to fit it in where we had some space to do it. And I wanted to try and align it with the sign code public hearing because there are some economies of effort for staff in terms of noticing and all that. And so and really some economies of effort in terms of workshopping those changes. So workshop on the draft code amendment, I'll have the red lines for this code amendment before you for July 23rd tentatively. We'll have our public hearing August 13th. It's actually not a very big lift to do this change. The change is not that difficult. It's just the more process on top of already onerous process. So ratification, the recommendation would happen on August 27th. We'll workshop it with City Council on September 2nd. The City Council will hold their public hearing on September 16th. And that gives us the ability to have the first read and the second read and have it go into effect by November. So that's all I had on that. I wanted to, this was a little bit out of left field for us, as I was putting it, literally as I was putting the agenda packet together that I got the letter and like, well, crap. So, anyhow, with that, citizen comments.
We'll move on. So do we have anyone online? And also, before we go on, did our other commissioner ever join us? Okay, good.
He said he just didn't have sound,
Okay, that's fine.
but. he has-
So we'll go to Secretary's report.
Yeah, so, again, I have provided you with an updated, comprehensive plan meeting calendar. In your packets. I promise it will change again. It's moving target. I wanted to share with you that we're starting to make some plans for, community engagement through, farmer's market and, Barefoot in the Park. We haven't had a lot of success with what we've been trying to push on Zen City. But we'll keep trying and we'll keep talking about it and we'll keep, I did, meet with Community Engagement Commission, not this month, but the prior month. And they're very interested in helping us. They'll help us get posters out, et cetera, as we do some things. I think one of the thoughts that, I've heard from the mayor is that she's interested in seeing us do a town hall on housing specifically as we get a little farther along. I want to have the draft of the policies and I want to have a roughed out draft of the chapter. And then I think we're probably in a good place to do that. We also think that we need to do something robust as Amy has shared with you and as we've talked about with urban design. Phil sent a really good definition of what urban village is,
Oh.
which is,
No,
no, that was a good article. It was.
I didn't write it.
I understand, but you found it. So anyhow, so.
I had some encouragement from somebody in the back of the room.
And just keeping on. We're working on OFM population, estimates. Now, those won't come out until the summer, but, we'll know what the estimate is in very short order. I just can't tell you what it is. Anyhow, that's about it. I did want to make you aware of a couple developments coming forward. Right now, Legacy Ridge West Phase F is going through a reasonable use exception process for the final phase to look at doing some work within the 30% slope. It's called out in our critical area ordinance. There is a process associated with it. And so we are going through that. I think that there's going to be a lot of angst about this. And as far as I can figure, it doesn't matter what my written decision is, somebody's going to appeal it. And best case scenario, the best will probably be that both parties appeal it and the hearing examiner decides. But that's a tough one. We also have phase 2 for Bella Lago. They've submitted for a preliminary plat. They also have to do a reasonable use exception. It's a much more limited reasonable use exception, but to get the roadway in, they are going to have to do some excavation on 30% slope. Not a lot, but again, at least I don't believe it's a lot based upon what I've seen, but they submitted the plat, but not the reasonable use exception. So, and finally, the preliminary binding site plan for Toledo Station just came in. So we've got that in process. So it's going to be a very busy summer for us. My last thing under Secretary's report is would somebody like to give City Council report?
Next week,
Yes.
anyone? No one would like to, huh? I guess I will.
Right. Thank you, Joe.
Sure.
You have the heart of a public servant.
Not worries. So we'll move on to planning commissioner reports. Anyone thing? Then our next meeting is April 9th. I will hear a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Nope.
All right, all in favor? Aye, thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Sharifa.